this is a slide actually, science, naturalism, humanism, and morality. This came off of American Humanist website, and morality there is defined in what I would call kind of a typical way, right? This is, obviously definitions are descriptive in nature, they're about common use. So that's not what morality means necessarily, but this is what most people think of when they think of morality. And it's interesting to me what's written there, and I can't quite see it, but it says principles concerning the distinction between right and wrong or good and bad behavior, and a particular system of values and principles of conduct, especially one held by a specific person or society. And you see definitions like this of morality all over the place. Here's another one, very similar. But notice in this definition, and I'll just read it aloud, the distinction between right and wrong or subjective assessment of either good or bad onto an action, thought, or belief. Now, as with the previous definition, it should be clear that most people think and use morality in terms of subjective. Meaning, this society has a morality, and that society has a different morality, and I have a morality, and you have a morality, and it might be different. But it doesn't tell us anything about how to figure out right from wrong. And it doesn't address anything about how, let's say you and I have differing moralities, and they're in conflict, or they're contradictory. By definition, if we're in contradiction, one of us has to be wrong, or both. Technically both, too. Yeah, and we don't know how to solve that. And none of the moral systems that we are privy to seem to have an answer for that either. So where do we start? That's really kind of the place I'd like to start at, is the beginning, right? So at first, we just have to realize that we have a lot of work ahead of us, right? We're not just going to walk out of this room with a full understanding, clarity in moral thought and moral methodology. But we can make some strides, right? And I already mentioned some of these things, right? We can't tell right from wrong in our current moral systems. It's all just he said, she said, or that's their culture, so that's why they do that. And we can't condemn or condone any behavior. And we don't have any real path. We don't have any direction, at least not now. There's not a system in place that tells us this is how we get from where we are to where we want to be, morally speaking. It's kind of just up to you, right? Or it's up to the culture you were raised in, or the indoctrinated religion that you were brainwashed into, or whatever it is, right? Whatever path you're on is largely your own, and most people, most of the time, don't even really feel comfortable challenging you. It's just that's how they are, right? I can't say they're good or bad. I wouldn't behave that way. They might say something like that. But they say, I'm not going to, that's their culture. Who am I to so-and-so? You've heard this, right? This all sounds familiar? So what I'd like to propose is that we make science out of morality. That we purposefully treat it as a science, and that we engage with it scientifically, and that we collect scientific data, and that we put it through the scientific method, and we subject it to peer review, and we find out what some of these answers really are. And then hopefully we could be smart enough to implement some of what we learn into our governmental documents, into our policies, and so on. So all of that is going to require soundness. We have to make sound moral decisions, and soundness is based on evidence. So as a new definition of what morality is, I would propose the following. It's an evidence-based system or methodology used to direct the thoughts, feelings, and actions of Homo sapiens towards promoting human flourishing while avoiding or diminishing human suffering. As a starting off point, there are a couple things to note here. We're going to be using evidence that's in the definition. That was lacking in all the other definitions. There's no word of evidence. There's no relation to evidence in any of the other definitions. The other is we're going to be using a methodology, specifically the scientific method. And this pertains to Homo sapiens. I use that word very specifically. That was picked because that does not leave anybody out. Everybody's Homo sapiens, right? If you've noticed in some of our documents, they say things like "we the people," but it doesn't say what a people is. It doesn't say what a person is. It doesn't say who it pertains to. And in fact, in that document, the one I'm referring to, if my memory serves, sometimes I get the three mixed up, the three founding documents, but it doesn't distinguish what a person is, but it absolutely distinguishes what a person isn't, specifically African Americans. They're not people in that document. They're only 3/5 of a person. And that math is never made right. There's nowhere in that document that says we were wrong and they're actually people, or what a person is, or how we can determine what a person is. So it's important that we make sure we know what we're talking about here. We set the scope, right? So at its very least, and I'll add on to this, a sound moral system does not promote suffering. That's probably important to say, right? And that's in relation and response to a lot of sort of philosophers and those types of folks that like to say morality is a philosophy. So they say something like, oh, well, this is just, and then they pull out philosophy jargon. This is just deontological morality, mixed in with utilitarianism or whatever. And there's all this baggage that comes with that. So I'm just further honing this definition to give some clarity. And at its very best, a science of morality promotes intellectual honesty and integrity, and we'll talk about those words specifically, where all of our thoughts and beliefs and actions are in alignment with the moral evidence that we have available. So that's a tall order. But I think that if this was a system that we were to implement, we could potentially achieve that. I mean, we have a system right now that's pretty good at determining the shape of the Earth, and still not everybody's in line, right? Some people still fumble that question. So I don't have delusions about what we're going to accomplish with a science of morality, but I would like to at least try, right? I think it's worth the doing. Science generally seems to be worth the doing. When we were asking, well, why would we go to the moon? What's on the moon? Well, as it turns out, a lot of that science ended up giving us the internet. A lot of those physicists decided, well, let's just build an internet so we can talk to each other quickly and easily, right? It's worth the doing, even if it doesn't seem like it right away, even if we can't convince a politician. So I understand there are some vague terms here, and I want to make sure that we bring clarity to terms like integrity or human flourishing or suffering, right? And we can address those in detail, but recognize in order to understand what those words mean, the vague parts, the only way to get there is science. How are we ever going to decide what is suffering without a method like science? After all, the scientific method is the only way to understand anything. Name another path to truth. And for some reason, whatever reason, we are not subjecting morality to that path, to that methodology. We're just saying I'm moral, or I'd like to be moral, or I know I did something I probably shouldn't have done, but I did it because of this, so now it's justified, and so on. And it's all messy, right? Everything's a pain. It's all a pain in the ass. Pardon me. But I think we can subject it to science, and I think we should, and I think even the going through of it, even if we have a lot of detractors, would probably bring us to something of benefit. So I just want to put you there. Now, before I move on and give you this is as basic as it gets. And believe me, this crowd is beyond and above all this for the most part. I know who I'm talking to, but not everybody is as savvy as you guys. And so sometimes I have to make things like ultra basic, right? Because some people believe the Earth is flat or whatever, right? Some people need some real work to get just to the basics. So some of this you're going to look at and go, well, duh, right? And I apologize. I'm not trying to talk down to you, but I am trying to bring this to the masses. So before we move on to the moral continuum, which is just a visual representation of my definition and what I just said, and it's just to give something in your mind to see when you think of the definition. Do you guys have any questions, or is there anything you don't like about the what I've said so far or whatever? Yes, sir.
Yes. So when you talk about science, how do you define science? The science of politics, the science, engineering type science, technical?
Well, we're going to talk about exactly what kinds of sciences and how science can reflect on morality, but I mean, I define science just like everybody else defines science. It's a methodology for understanding the truth and gaining knowledge. It has multiple branches. It's physics and chemistry and biology and psychology and neurology and all that, physiology. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Discovering the truth.
Yeah, it's I would say it's the methodology for discovering truth.
Good.
Or gaining knowledge, representing and modeling reality. There's a lot of different ways you could say that. Some people don't like that word truth. I just did a presentation on truth yesterday, and some people, I'm not going to say who, didn't love everything I said, right? Yes, sir.
My understanding is you're making as a basic assumption, which I think shared in this room very much, that science is the only and best way to gain knowledge and be accurate. But there are an awful lot of people that say poetry, fine art,
Sure.
music, that's the way you get to real truth.
Sure. Is there a question, or do you want to just make a statement?
I think that getting to the truth, there are multiple pathways according to quite a few people. I disagree, but that's the way.
No, I understand. And to them, I would probably say, okay, well, poetry, your way to the moon. Show me how your music or art or what was the other one you said?
Music
or religion or belief
no, I didn't
or whatever.
Say religion.
Love, right?
But I did say poetry, and people say
Poetry.
that's the way you get to the true soul of a human being.
Sure.
That's all this scientific stuff about how the gut works or how the brain
Oh, no,
works.
yeah. I understand. No, to be clear, not everybody's going to be on board with this right away.
Almost
In fact-
nobody, let me put it more strongly.
Almost nobody?
I think that, and especially
Maybe get to the end of the
last 10
presentation
years,
before
science
you
is being
decide it's not gonna
declining
work.
very much in the public perceptions.
Only in the United States. There's a whole other world out there that embraces science much, much more than we do. But no, I take your point. This is not an easy road. I have not aimed low and then overachieved. I've aimed really high, and I'm probably going to fail. But we'll get to that. We'll get to my failure later.